I
Righty.
think I just came across a bug to get her circumvent.
Oh, just getting warmed up, the vent
Oh,
spleen and
yeah.
everything. Oh,
Okay, cállate.
All righty
Hi.
then. Hey there. Hey there. Hi there. Ho there. 28th of May, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Welcome to Dis and Dat. We're continuing our look at Rosa Luxemburg. I'm not sure whether we'll do the whole week. I am thinking of showing the Margareta von Trotta movie, a biopic about Rosa Luxemburg tomorrow. It is a 2 hour film, so I want your feedback of whether you really want to commit to 2 hours from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock tomorrow, or we can schedule it for a totally different time and I can continue yakking. So you may want to think about that, look on the website, um, look it up. It is a good film. It's an award-winning film. It does represent a kind of if you've seen any of Volker Schondorf's films, this is, it's in that same genre, as it were. So you can look that up and consider how that might be interesting and useful. And I think the actress in this particular film is, for those who, you need to sort of decide whether you like Robert Longo as a director, is married to Robert Longo, which makes either good or bad sense. So anyway, I begin today with we were looking at Rosa Luxemburg and her kind of general biography, and I proposed that we might consider looking at the introductory pages, which I neglected to upload, but I will upload them at the end of my yakking here. Of the introduction to what's his name? What's it and and Anderson's introduction to the Rosa Luxemburg Reader of 2004. That is a monthly review text. The review is a decent little review, other than the nitpicking about not having a sufficient bibliographic set of references for whatever reason. If it's a reader, it probably shouldn't have too extensive a critique on that basis anyway. It depends what you think about a reader. I think it's a good undergraduate type reader, a good overview. And since it's done by the people who are part of that the Rosa Luxemburg Center Foundation that did the video from yesterday, I think that's not so bad a deal. So you can sort of think about that. Note that in today we're going to think a little bit about the kind of history that Rosa Luxemburg is trying to fill in. Essentially, she's trying to fill in what Marx was doing. She covers the same path. It's an important path because it's subject in a historical materialist sense to the kinds of revisions once we find out more about the history. Recalling, of course, that the people in the Renaissance didn't know that they were in the Renaissance. So similarly, Burckhardt, blah, blah, blah. Similarly, this question of knowing whether you're in the feudal mode of production, Monty Python notwithstanding, I think you need to sort of, think about how we revise or rethink history, kind of retcon history, as it were. And so I found this little thing on the U.S. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who is a tried and true evangelical type, up to and including the self-monitoring software that he has with his son, notifying each other when they look at pornography. So Speaker Mike Johnson, the fall of Rome happened because they condoned gay people, not due to invasions, poor central governance, non-stop civil wars, or the growing importance of Byzantium, which is really what the history is. Gay people existed before that. In fact, if you want to do it, you have to go back to the Greeks and for all the usual gay reasons. But Mike Johnson referred to the fall of Rome happening because of gay people rather than the kind of debauchery that is not necessarily gay, but in fact gender fluid, if you want to go to Caligula at all. So anyway, the question that we want to contrast, of course, and which I'm going to yak a little bit about today, not too much, is this the kind of choices that we have. They're not simply dichotomous, but we do come to these kinds of contrasts. That is, one contrast is barbarism with a human face, and we don't have to talk too long about that. An idea that comes to us in the sort of New Left period, more important for are looking at Rosa Luxemburg, is the idea of socialism or barbarism. And I think in the current election season, we do see barbarism. I would assert to you that Trump represents barbarism. He gets farther and farther into it because, in fact, that is his nature. It is a Dionysian rather than Apollonian kind of obsession, and pokes out in various moments. Either being sardonic or cruel, or just simply being a terrible person. I think we can see what kind of barbarism he has in mind. He's not about peace. He's not against war. And so you can see how the libertarians sort of took him to task. So aside from this peculiar little commentary by revealing Mike Johnson's own kind of psychosexual problems, we can move further. So we may be entering a new era. Multiple interlocking crises are calling into question the continuing viability of capitalism, reposing Rosa Luxemburg's warning. And we've sort of revised it by saying it's not socialism or barbarism, but rather eco-socialism or barbarism. And she didn't say eco-socialism, but we can see, and we can make various connections, some of which are misogynist and stereotyped and et cetera, gendered, however you want to consider it. But it is, I think, important to look at the larger discourse. That is, it's certainly possible, it's not contradictory, to assert that an eco-socialism is a natural step from Rosenberg's original comments on socialism or barbarism. I don't think that's a problematic choice. In both senses, we're trying to distinguish the relative autonomy of an idea about socialism. And those of us who care more about democracy know that pure socialism, that is a communist socialism, as it were, can be incredibly problematic. And that history remains problematic. The dictatorship of the proletariat, et cetera, Leninism, then becoming Stalinism. It's there. We see that it actually existed, that it was necessary to keep the Soviet Union alive, but also engendered its own revisionist problems, as we reminded ourselves a while back when talking about the 1956 Khrushchev speech, which, may not seem important to you, but if anyone just simply kills themselves because there was a speech, that's kind of a pretty serious media effect. That is that Khrushchev, essentially saying it was all wrong, and that, you've got to stop this cult of personality deal. And it is a kind of a rupture, as it were, between a variety of interesting things, some of which Luxemburg, to get back to the point, kind of represents. How global are our perspectives on the questions of socialism? How international should we be? And how should we confront the real problems of imperialism? Now, we can look inward and be isolationist, sort of, not unlike certain ideas about libertarianism, which El Trumpo tried to play on, but was completely, he's an idiot, so it didn't go anywhere, and people laughed at him. But we do need to sort of deal with these. So eco-socialism or barbarism, there is no third third way is based on the slogan socialism or barbarism, which Rosa Luxemburg raised to such great effect during World War I and the American Revolution. Recall, of course, that there is a tremendous anti-war movements going on against the Great War and against ultimately the German Revolution that results on the one hand in the Weimar Republic, but also gives us, with all due respect, Nazis. And so socialists sort of cleaved to that because socialism was very strong and not identical, not necessarily identical to the Russian model. And so you have all these variations that give us and you can read all the texts on this, that it gives us all of the other issues and variations that occur within continental philosophy for so-called Western Marxism. So, and it's worth continuing to talk about it because it's at the root of every time you have to talk to somebody who's an brand socialist party, whether it's Marxist-Leninist, Maoist, blah, blah, blah. There's a bunch of them. They've got issues. The issues range from direct action, necessary violence, unnecessary violence, entryism, whole bunches of other things. And I'll get us onto these very bizarre kind of purity tests. And you need to sort of, as I have done, and of course I could be accused of being a petty bourgeois revisionist. You need to get a better sense of the whole deal. It's just a complex discourse, and you need to sort of see where everyone's coming from before you can make certain decisions about what is correct action. So anyway, Luxemburg first raised the idea that humanity faced a choice between the victory of socialism and the end of civilization in a powerful anti-war pamphlet she wrote in prison in 1915. Remember, she got thrown in prison a couple of times, needless to say. The crisis in German social democracy, better known as the Unionists pamphlet, after the pen name she used to avoid prosecution, played a key role in educating and organizing a revolutionary left opposition to the pro-war leadership of the German Social Democratic Party. Now you can see there's all kinds of issues just right there. Needless to say, in World War I, you have all these not so identical things to what happens in World War II, yet they are the foundation for that same kind of problem and issues. And recall, of course, that you get global pandemic, massive killing technologies, and all of that stuff is a big deal and cataclysmic relative to the globe, because it's happening at the same time as imperialism and colonialism and all that stuff. And it's given us our current state of problems, and I assert to you that it's really quite similar, not identical, but similar. It's not that history repeating itself idiocy, but there is a resemblance, just like we went back and looked at the Spanish flu, for example. And noting, of course, that the same methods to cope with the Spanish flu are ones that the Republicans, the current day Republicans, resisted. That is, masks. Anyway, Luxemburg attributed the concept to one of the founders of modern socialism. Engels once said, bourgeois society stands at the crossroads, either transition to socialism or regression into barbarism. Until now, we have all probably read and repeated these words thoughtlessly without suspecting their fearsome seriousness. Today, we face the choice exactly as Friedrich Engels foresaw it a generation ago. Either the triumph of imperialism and the collapse of all civilization, as in ancient Rome, like our Speaker of the House, depopulation, desolation, degeneration, a great cemetery, or the victory of socialism. That means the conscious, active struggle of the international proletariat against imperialism and its method of war. And these are just the simple choices. And they reveal themselves, manifestly, and are, on the one hand, appear simple, but are rather quite complex in how we construct our solution. The search, and so there's a whole background to where does she get this idea from, or this source? And it's not, as orthodox as we would like it. That is, it's not in Engels. Marx doesn't say it. It gets misattributed. There are all kinds of and not that finding the originary, utterance of it is makes it better or more pure, and that's in fact the purity problem. But it is, you want to get to the kind of conceptual elements of it, which are good and bad, and we need to sort of see them in their historical context. So it goes back to the man who is widely viewed as the most authoritative Marxist theoretician after Marx and Engels, Karl Kautsky. And Kautsky has, he actually managed to survive World War I and World War II for the most part. And so it is amazing in that sense that he doesn't get kind of marginalized in a bigger context. So anyway, and there's this whole background of the history of Marxism of Kautsky and Bernstein, working through these kinds of things for the SDP, SPD, and getting trashed for it, right, in a variety of ways. The critique of Bernstein, blah blah blah. And you can get further into that if you read Martin Jay's work, for example, on the rise of the Frankfurt School, et cetera. You get these kinds of, kind of working through all of these different national parties or attempts at international parties. But you can see that Lenin, for example, based his 1896 draft program for Russian socialists on it. So the Erfurt program is a pretty important official program because it really, for the SPD, it identifies itself from 1891, I think, to 1959 as a Marxist party. So anyway, but it's a short kind of deal, and then there's sort of a thing that there's kind of a pamphlet and blah blah blah. The program became one of the most widely read texts of socialist activists throughout Europe. Kautsky's commentary was translated into 16 languages before 1914 and became the accepted popular summa of Marxism around the world. So you can see that it was influential, and as much as people trash Kautsky as being, sort of Austrian socialist, he's still a Marxist ultimately, and it is problematic. But then again, he was writing, during a very, problematic time, as so many, of the period. So undoubtedly, Luxemburg read Kautsky, and if indeed the socialist commonwealth were an impossibility, then mankind would be cut off from all further economic development. In that event, modern society would decay, as did the Roman Empire nearly 2,000 years ago, and finally relapse into barbarism. This model of history, I guess it's the Gibbon model of the fall of the Roman Empire, and in fact, phrasing it in imperial terms is typical of the hegemonic sort of stuff. Writing about this does, ignores or excludes questions of pre-Columbian cultures and Asiatic despotism and all that sort of stuff. So there is a kind of bias built into the model, and which is problematic, but it just shows how in Western civilization is sort of structured on these very bad ideas, like, for example, so-called white culture, whatever that means. As things stand today, capitalist civilization cannot continue. We must either move forward into socialism or fall back into barbarism. So it is a forward and back kind of issue, but, it's uneven, needless to say. So there is an identical set of sources for this socialism or barbarism. And so Kautsky is 1892, Luxemburg in 1915. They are pretty similar. And I think you could sort of see that it's kind of, if you think of branding the slogan or the jingle, it's kind of there. And they both refer to the fall of the Roman Empire, and you don't want to get into the historiography of it, but it is, I think, important. And these things are all kind of the historical problem, but it is it's not trademarking or whatever, but I think it is important that it sort of sits there in context. So I use that because in this article in Climate and Capitalism, and Ian August is a very good writer and a really important to read. He does want to square away socialism or barbarism. So there is a variety of sort of eco-socialist writing that tries to incorporate Luxemburg. And you want to sort of think that is it simply just grafting the ecology onto it? Well, it's more than that. And it is, you know, a part of the question of a critique of capitalism. So you need to sort of get into that. And then the reasons for reading Rosa Luxemburg from economics point of view, a political economy point of view, is the question of accumulation of capital ultimately. And needless to say, this is the same accumulation of capital issue that occurs in Marx's 3 volumes of Capital. It has all of those elements in it, need to be explained. And in fact, some of the details get to be problematic for some people. You know, some people are, you know, you get to a certain place and you got all these imperialists around you, but, you know, maybe you just need to work on your socialism in one country and not, you know, sort of, there's this weird isolationism about it, partially because it's too hard to do the other thing because you've got all these variations and discord and other issues that have to do with armies and, you know, militarism and other kinds of things. So what is Luxemburg's contribution to our understanding of the world today, threatened by environmental destruction, violence against women, gross inequality, insecure and exploitative work, and the rise of the far right? Pretty much 21st century, her diagnosis of global capitalism is perhaps more relevant than ever. For her, economic expansion and the resulting devastation of the environment was not a defect of global capitalism, but an inherent feature of a destructive system. A feature, not a bug. In The Accumulation of Capital, she explained that by definition, capital needed to conquer, absorb, and destroy non-capitalist economies and territories to survive. Still does that. Still doing that. Luxemburg criticized Marx for not having paid enough attention to these external contradictions in economic growth. A socialist revolution for Luxemburg, the only way to stop the engulfing, a socialist revolution was for Luxemburg the only way to stop the engulfing of non-capitalist life into capitalism. This is that uneven development issue. She taught that war, colonialism, and unsustainable extraction from nature, that's what she was sort of looking at. This accumulation of capital thing is about extractive technology, ultimately, are products of global capitalism. The result is the loss of irreplaceable natural wealth and people struggling for food, water, and shelter in the developing world. Luxemburg also criticized economic growth based on financial speculation and profit making. This is the other issue, right? Financialization in global stock markets. She argued that such a model is prone to crisis, as in our current state, the 2008 crash demonstrated, which creates unemployment and job precarity that cannot be easily solved. The economy loses the capacity to give employment to every adult with the capacity to work. Many of Luxemburg's contemporaries, such as Edward Bernstein, trusted that credit would alleviate capitalism's tendencies toward crises. Right? Note that this credit idea is important, and it's not a new thing. And when David Graeber talks about 5,000 years of credit, he's sort of maybe right. However, in Reform or Revolution, Luxemburg argued that credit would only postpone and even intensify crisis. It's kind of where we are now with the interest rate, blah, 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 blah. And certain people still claiming that the recession's already here. Well, it depends how you measure it. And people should relax and work through the issues of price gouging and all these other things that are going on right now. Economic crises that result in this way allow the far right to stoke division within communities. That's what we've been looking at Trump at the libertarians, etc., by turning widespread economic insecurity into a stick to beat refugees and immigrants with. So can we save Earth from the global expansion of capital, the fascism that emerges from it, which is where we are right now? The 100th anniversary of Luxemburg's assassination should make us reflect. This is 2019. On her foresight, as Luxemburg herself saw it, the choice is socialism or barbarism. So that's an article on how she sort of warned of that. And then there's another article which is a little bit more, well, it could be diaristic. It is written, in kind of a women's point of view, and on one, however you want to frame that. But I think it's important to see, and the article kind of does it in that kind of women's writing, if you want to use it in that kind of way. But it begins by talking about sort of certain stereotype elements about the decorative flower, the red flower, and the red flower, the red rose, is a important image for some socialists, and is prominent in the branding of socialists on ballots, and particularly in Western Europe. And also in America, there's segments of the Democratic Socialist America that use that in their branding. So the red flower is a fitting tribute to Rosa, particularly given her lifelong interest in botany, nature, and animals. Now, this is that whole thing of a kind of revisionist thing where we're thinking about Marx being concerned with the environment, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the metabolistic sort of stuff that Bellamy Foster yaks about, right? While other Marxist thinkers, including Marx himself, Vladimir Lenin, Amilcar Cabral, and W.E.B. Du Bois, have received a rigorous reassessment and revitalization of their radical politics in light of the climate catastrophe, Luxemburg's work on nature has received feminizing disregard. It is viewed as sentimental, expressing her love for plants rather than an integral part of her revolutionary life. By revisiting her work, which should change. And so the question of Marxist ecologies comes up, and as you know, I've been sort of fiddling around with that, notwithstanding Bellamy Foster. There's been a veritable explosion of literature on major political economists and their ecologies in recent years, and there's a welcome response to the normalization, this is neoliberalism, normalization of market-based solutions in climate change. Nature is commodified and monetized not only in its exploitation, but also in its protection. Carbon trading, biodiversity offsetting, and other valuations of nature have become common sense responses to climate disaster. Against this backdrop of questioning of market rationales and a discussion of capitalism's role in climate catastrophe are important means for unsettling the normalization of pro-market ideas. This is this is one of the underlying issues, of course, of a critique of the liberalism under Green New Deal, for example. Marx in particular has been reread in light of the climate crisis, most prominently by scholars such as Kohei Saito, yes, we talked about him, and John Bellamy Foster. Much of this literature acts as a corrective to previous interpretations of Marxist works, in which he is presented as uncritically praising the progress of technology and productive forces. There's this is the Promethean problem of technological determinism, as opposed to environmental determinism or other determinism, which under socialism would be owned and controlled by the working class. The anthropocentric view attributed to Marx is often put down to his value theory. This is where it gets all ugly, based on human labor power as the only source of value. So the value form argument, gets all botched up in this these sets of theoretical issue. Against this, Bellamy Foster has based his work on Marx and ecology, on Marx's metabolic rift approach. According to him, it is important to afford attention to environmental crises as a contradiction to capitalism. Saito extends this argument, arguing that Marx's ecology was a fundamental part of his critique of political economy. This is where it gets crazy, right? I have written a couple of things on this in reference to Matt Huber. Particularly in his later years, Saito aims to complete Marx's unfinished theory of ecology. This is in the context of, the unfinished critique of political economy. This forms the basis for developing a historical environmental materialism about the disturbances and the metabolic interaction between humans and the earth. This is where his model of degrowth communism comes from. Despite certainly not gaining universal support among Marxists, theoretically, an ecology of historical materialism is not a large leap to make. In fact, it just needs more people writing about it. Meanwhile, drawing on Lenin's work, notable climate theorist and activist Andreas Malm has called for ecological Leninism, invoking the need for a Leninist temporality of urgency in the sense of thinking about politics for catastrophic times. Now, you can just see the wheels turning. Ecological Trotskyism, what would that look like? So Malm calls for ecological war communism so as to turn the environmental crisis into a crisis for fossil capital. Further revolutionary leaders and thinkers whose work has been re-examined for its ecological credentials include the agronomic writings of Amilcar Cabral and W.E.B. Du Bois. These contributions to the debate place revolutionary Marxist thinkers at the intersection between society, nature, and racism, highlighting the need for an anti-colonial ecology. Despite certainly not gaining universal support among Marxists, theoretically, an ecology of historical materialism is not a large leap to make. A materialist reading includes a better understanding of the interaction between humans and the material world, including nature in relation to social structures. Pretty much the Marxist deal. Anyway, so this continues on for, stuff she wrote about. She wrote about, plants and collections of stuff. And so, she paints flowers and landscapes. She loved nature. That she writes letters about this. This division is portrayed with kind of gendered associations, but it is part of a complete life. And in the biographies, you get a little bit of this sense, but you actually, because most of them do have this feminist spin to it, it's more about her having a much more liberated sense of her own sexuality, et cetera, et cetera. And also because maybe Yogesh is what her primary partner was a bit of a pig in certain ways. So anyway, but product of our times. These two aspects of Rosa's life appear to cancel each other out. Her political economy is not taken seriously because she was also a woman who loved and painted. And her botany is not taken seriously because it was not obviously connected to revolutionary politics. Now, what remains for those sympathetic to socialist politics is Rosa the icon, an iconic face on a red banner, a red carnation. However, in line with the feminist methodology of breaking down these divisions and her sentimentalization, we might think of this unity as the foundation for Rosa's ecology. Now, that may take it a little too far, but it is notable that prior to studying political science and economics, Luxemburg moved to Switzerland to study botany and zoology. Her interests in ecology and political economy became particularly entwined in 1913, which saw both the publication of her magnum opus, The Accumulation of Capital, and what she described in a letter to her friend Louise Kautsky, yes, connected to the other Kautsky, as the beginning of her plant cataloging. While thinking through issues of the violent spread of capitalism into non-capitalist spaces, Rosa Luxemburg went for walks near her Berlin flat in Sudan, collecting, pressing, and botanizing plants. Rosa eventually compiled 18 plant journals. In The Accumulation of Capital, we see a sustained effort of bringing together ecology and political economy. In particular, one can see this in Rosa's description of capital's restless and relentless expansion through primitive accumulation, which depends on modern colonial policy to appropriate the most important means of production. This is settler colonialism. The most important of these productive forces, explains Luxemburg, is, of course, the land, its hidden mineral treasure, and its meadows, woods, and water. Given the ongoing exploitation of nature for imperialist wars and new accumulation projects, we have much to learn from Rosa Luxemburg's theory of nature and capital. So this suggests that we should read her magnum opus, The Accumulation of Capital. Capitalism's expansionism was not just about the effects on labor relations, it was also about its effects on nature. She referred to these dynamics both in a metaphorical sense, and this is where it's ripe for humanist interpretation, of course, as well as a materialist sense. Both in the former category, for example, she described capitalism as needing other economic systems as its soil. So we're thinking, right, metaphorically, but also in the Liebig sense, the actual soil itself, the dirt itself. Although the effects of capital brutal expansion and accumulation on the environment had not yet become real in the sense of climate breakdown during her lifetime, Rosa already saw the materialist problems associated with the unrestricted utilization of all substances and facilities afforded by nature and soil in capitalist production. Rosa had a keen eye for exploitation of nature in the context of capitalist relations. Quote, to tolerate any restriction in this respect would be contrary to the very essence of capital, its whole mode of existence, unquote, she claimed. Just as her political economy includes relationships between capital and nature, her letters to her friends that include observations on nature are often related back to capitalism and imperialism. She regularly placed observations on animals, including her cat, Mamie, and the context of their exploitation for war or human endeavors for capitalist accumulation. Darn those war cats. One such letter was written by Rosa from prison to her friend Sonia Liebknecht. Yes, that Liebknecht, who she calls her Sonichka, mein Vöglein, my little bird, Vöglein. In it, Rosa describes the plight of a water buffalo from Romania caught as a war trophy. Rosa describes how she watched while soldiers mistreated one of the buffalo until it bled, leaving it, Rosa believed, with an expression like a chastised child. She writes of her tears and pain. Oh, my poor buffalo, my poor beloved brother, we both stand here powerless and mute, are one in pain, and powerless in longing. Given the ongoing exploitation of nature for imperialist wars and new accumulation projects, we have much to learn from Rosa Luxemburg's theory of nature and capital. Perhaps one day the laying of red carnations and red roses will come to symbolize the rich legacy of political economy and ecology that Rosa left for us. So that's my little deal for today. I've used up most of my time. I propose, this is the link. It's on Archive. Has Barbara Sukawa and directed by Margarita Montrada, 1986. It has subtitles, so it could be a little problematic, I suppose. So and it is 2 hours long, so I leave that to you to cogitate over as we proceed further. Yes, I won't stop share. I will look at the yes, some of us do not believe in collective punishment. Hot under the collar, belligerent sex and desultory. Well, indeed. Anyway, so yes, this is kind of what we look at. 24 hours to learn German. Yes, indeed. Any questions, problems, brickbats, whatever. I left enough time so that we can think about this. The biography is interesting. She gets right down and dirty into the issue of, as some people refer to it, as a kind of the necessity of taking action, of seeing oneself in the revolution. And this is her issue with a lot of politics of the period. That and lest you think that that's unimportant, it's a clear theme that goes through discussions of the Frankfurt School, for example. It is this difference between kind of democratic socialist politics that support the status quo and a sense that things aren't happening fast enough, and you can see that revolutions are occurring. A lot of people are getting killed. The question is, how much do you want to engage the revolutionary process, and is it going to mean anything? And you have to sort of see what is your place in history. To look at it in a much more popularized version, you can see that same struggle, the same theoretical struggle that we watched Reds together with Warren Beatty and Diane Keaton. You can see that the Jack Reed character is going through exactly these same issues in the American political context and seeing all the unfortunate divisions among these things. And for those of you who will get to read Martin Jay's work at some moment, Max Eastman is a key character, and he's portrayed in the context of the Frankfurt School, and then there's always Emma Goldman, but Emma Goldman eventually gets deported, right? Or not eventually, but she gets deported rather early. Let's put it that way. After the end of Woodrow Wilson era and the rise of Coolidge and the Palmer raids and the FBI, and foreigners get deported. So it is anti-immigrant in that particular localized context. Noting, of course, that those of you who attended the Palestinian conference on the weekend note that some people couldn't get visas to come to the United States. Comments, brickbats. 9 more minutes of my obligation to this time period. If you comments on whether we should or shouldn't show the Ventrada film, remember it's 2 hours, so hopefully it's interesting enough to stick with it. I will, as we yammer further, if people are doing those kinds of things, I will upload the reading that we've been sort of covering. That is pages 7 through 32 of the Luxemburg Reader.
Do you know why she was imprisoned?
Oh, she was being a revolutionary, right? She was a member of the wrong party. The police thought she was a dangerous radical. She was a dangerous radical.
Right.
People find she was an uppity woman.
Indeed.
Uppity woman.
And
Yeah,
she
that's
liked
pretty
flowers, and she liked flowers and nature, which was obviously she was trying to demasculate,
Indeed.
emasculate rather the revolutionary movement. But seriously, folks, I mean, she was only a danger to the current distribution of wealth and power in that society.
Darn.
When has that ever gotten anybody into trouble, John?
Indeed. Indeed. Okay, I think there's perhaps enough people out, so I'll show it tomorrow. It'll give us 2 hours. It doesn't collide with anything, so hopefully, it's worth considering. I'm uploading the reading, a PDF of the specific reading. If you
Well, I
want
found it on Studio Canal, so I'm buzzing. So I'll be able to watch it on my TV instead of squinting down the phone. So yes, I'm all for it.
Alrighty.
Marvelous.
It is a Studio Canal production. Studio Canal does some of the best stuff, connecting Anglophonic and Francophonic. Yeah, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. We'll try and look at it. I know that, let me warn ahead of time that because of bandwidth issues, someone may have to contribute their higher speed broadband with the linkage. I've included the link there for you to look at it yourself. It is at archive.org. Makes it quite publicly available. And Lane has noted that you can get it elsewhere. Okay, I'm uploading the Luxemburg Reader, pages 7 to 32. It reads very quickly. It is, it's the front end of the reader. So you don't have to read the things themselves unless you're amused. And the full book itself is in the files section on Discord. For those of you who are concerned by those matters. Let's see what else. I got another 6 minutes left. If there's other comments, brickbats, you can see that some people might appropriate Rosa Luxemburg for one's own purposes, rather, that eco-socialism for some people is a problem, degrowth is a problem. So, you need to sort of get through these kinds of things. And how did she survive so long? It seems they were way more tactical than today. How did she survive so long? In what way?
Like
Not
before
getting
getting
shot.
back.
Were they more tactical? More radical than today? Yes, they were more radical. I mean, you have people arming themselves and getting into street fights, shooting guns at each other in the German context, right? There was a clear attempt to overthrow the imperial German government, and which there was trouble in the streets, and they got the damn country into war. People got pissed off, and so anti-war sentiment was very high. Some people thought of it as an important means to, it's sort of like some people, with respect, interpret the current Palestinian conflict as a means to get at other revolutionary activities. That is, to socialize investment. That is, sort of DEI, BDS. All of that stuff is not simply about institutional reform, but it is about revolutionary seizing the means of production in the big picture, if you're really into that sort of stuff. Namely because challenges to the American military-industrial complex have gone way back to when some of us were much younger. It's the same damn thing, I would assert. Not identical, but it has the same structural features that, perhaps we should make things that we call public actually public, like public utilities.
What an
It's a
idea.
wacky idea.
I mean, Christ.
Are you high on hooch?
Well, I have two podcast episodes to recommend. The first is Current Affairs. The latest episode is an interview with Kohei Saito about his degrowth communism.
Yeah.
And the other is Revolutionary Left.
Yep, left.
Yeah, he has, it's called Defending Socialism, a Logical Critique of Capitalism, with philosopher Scott Sheehan, who wrote a book, Socialism, a Logical Introduction.
If you want to put the links up in the chat, that would be helpful to us, Sean. Thank you.
I got
Oh,
the
do it
dial
later.
up.
Or do it later. Put it in Discord. We never close. I included also interviews the other day in the earlier this and that with Kohei Saito as well. He's just become very popular because his book, the more popularized book on the Anthropocene, sold 500,000 copies in Japan, in Japanese, and that's a pretty big deal for the Japanese book market. So it's obviously had a kind of cascading effect. Also, probably because there are a lot of left parties in Japan, even though they're not in charge. So, the Good David stream is on the top of the hour. Outstanding. All right. Close out the show, and I'll cut the YouTubes. Yes, do it, Joe. I'm happy to do this. I will stop the share now.